Oh, shit. We're live anyway. Whatever. Okay, welcome to the MMA Vivisection. This is for UFC Japan. Josh Barnett versus Roy Nelson. Big heavyweight action in the land of the rising sun. And like I guess it really will be the land of the rising sun for this card too over there. Isn't it going to be at like 6 in the morning or something absurd?
Is it?
Well, I mean it's at night for us, so it's not going to be at night for them, you know?
I guess you're right. I actually didn't really even consider what the start time for this one might be.
I think we're starting at like 5 p.m. So locally it's gonna be at some absurd hour.
Zane, are you going to show the audience members what they're in for based on what you're the one viewer close next to you?
Oh yes, you are in for some totally fantastic,
Some hot dog action over
yeah,
here.
hot dog action. Some
That's what everyone looks like when they're done listening to one of these
that's right.
3 hours later.
That is your sample viewer. That's basically what we expect out of the folks at home, who right now are zero because I just put this show up as like we'll be starting soon an hour ago. So everyone who was like, "Oh yeah, I'm ready," is like tuned out long ago since then. But anyway, I'm joined by my esteemed co-hosts Dallas Winston, Connor Rubish. Thank you, gentlemen.
No, thank you.
Oh,
Their main card, by the way, will start at 12 p.m. if my math is correct.
oh, okay,
And so,
yeah.
the main card will start at 12 at noon for them.
So yeah, like I say, literally the land of the rising sun.
Yes.
That's really weird. I'd be pissed off if I was a fighter. How often do you have to fight at 9 in the morning, 10 in the morning?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they love it. Maybe then it's like, hey, I get to go home. I have the rest of the day. Got it's like
I
when you
mean,
have
what
that.
do you
I have time to
after your
catch up
fight,
on
right?
housework.
You want to go and like undo your weight cut and go out drinking and have a post-fight party. You can spend all Saturday afternoon and evening at a post-fight party that way.
That's right. You can even plan it. You can actually like go get balloons and order the
You can have time to pick them up before the party starts.
exactly.
Perfect.
I
It's
know.
what every fighter dreams of.
Seriously, I think it's like when you have that one meeting and it's at 10 and you're like, oh, I don't want to have to get up and get prepped for that. But then it's over and you're like, hey, I got my whole rest of my day in front of me. So I bet that the fighters are pretty happy about this, frankly.
Fighting is so much like an office job. There's so many
Absolutely.
parallels.
Hey, they all
Yeah,
say
knock
it's
that
just
one
another
meeting
day at the office.
off for the day and get started on your weekend plans.
That's right. So on that note, we're fucking around because the undercard of this is not that exciting, quite frankly. There's not a lot that we're like really pumped for. I think we're gonna breeze through the first couple fights. Maybe each of us will take a crack at a couple of the more interesting or bouts we find more interesting on the other undercard before we really get into the meat of it. And most of this is just so we don't sit here and gab for 3 hours and at the expense of our viewers who are just chomping at the bit to hear who's going to win between Josh Barnett and Roy Nelson. Um, so on that note, first up, welterweight fight. Shinzo Anzai or Anjai, I don't know how to say that. Whatever. Shinjo Anji, I think Shinjo Anji was how Goldberg put it, and I'm gonna trust Goldberg on
Yeah,
this one for
Ooh,
that's
it's a risky
trustworthy.
move. Trust
it is.
Goldberg.
Shinjo Anji versus Roger Zapata to open up the prelims. Zapata, former tough contestant for one of those seasons, I can't remember which one. Finally getting his UFC debut after a long injury layoff. Connor, I know you've done yeah, make a pick on this. I'm not even gonna ask you to break it down, but
Well, a lot of people disagree with me on this. I expect nothing different here, but I've never been that impressed with Shinjo Anzai. Kind of a wild brawler. Roger Zapata hasn't done much in the sport yet, but I just think he's the more technical fighter, so I'm going to go with Zapata.
Dallas.
I feel like I always bring this up, but again, there seems to be a lot of matchups on here where one guy's the steady Eddie and the other one is kind of a little more unpredictable or creative or wild. And this is the fight that I know least about. But I watched a couple fights and I did come away thinking I would probably lean towards Zapata just because he's got more of like a tried and proven conventional game. Nothing mind blowing, but still he seems to be pretty solid. I don't feel confident about it, but I'll agree with Connor.
Yeah, I think the thing here is really that we a lot of it'll depend on Zapata's fitness. I think because he looks like a guy who's getting shape in his career. Like he you look at his time on Tough especially, and he does not look like he's fight ready.
He was a chubby middleweight then, and he should be a relatively lean welterweight now.
Yeah, as long as he's actually getting in shape. Like that's
Right.
the thing. Is that you do have to if you're going to get in shape over your fight career, you actually have to get in shape over your fight career.
My hope is that he's actually been doing something useful for his career over the 18-month layoff he's just been on.
Yeah, so if he has a really technical boxing style, good footwork, and seems like a solid fighter. Anji seems to lead with his face and both hands out, and I mean, he's a brawler, but we already saw against a not very good striker that got him knocked out.
Doesn't Zapata mean shoe in Espanol?
Yeah, maybe.
Zapateria.
Anyway, probably. Not so we don't get sidetracked here.
Good shit.
Odds.
I enjoyed that factoid.
I just like to educate the viewers.
That was helpful. That you know what? It was very helpful. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stepped on it. Dallas, thank you so much.
I've paid
shoe
for
pun
myself.
there.
Stepped on it. Oh,
Shoe
I see what
pun.
you did there, you pun-slinging gangster.
Oh,
Sabotaged your joke. Huh?
anyway,
No, he strengthened it, actually.
Well, but sabotage comes from the word sabot, which
He
is a wooden
sabotaged
shoe.
me.
Is a wooden shoe, huh? Etymology jokes here.
All right, now, Connor, you've gone too far. We are.
okay, we are well into the weeds already. Odds dead even. Anzai minus 110 to minus 115 to minus 102. Zapata plus 100, barely an underdog to minus 115 or to minus 120. So you can get Zapata anywhere from an underdog to a favorite. Oh, actually, Anzai is minus 130 to minus 102. Still, like it's dead even. Flip a coin as far as judges are or as far as betting is concerned. Next fight on the card: Naoyuki Kotani versus Cajun Johnson. Dallas, quick thoughts.
I've never been super impressed with Cajun Johnson. Um, and I feel like he has potential, like the skill set. I knew a little bit about him before he came on. What he was on?
Tough
Wasn't he?
Nations.
Yeah, okay. I thought, and he did okay, but he has. Actually, Connor, I totally agreed when I read your write up on Sherdog that he seems nervous. Like when he throws everything, he seems real jittery. Like he's hesitant on everything, and I don't know if it's enough to pick Kotani. It's funny because Kotani and Nakamura. Who's filling in for Kichi Kunamoto?
Uh,
Nakamura.
Nakamura, yeah.
I feel like one of those two guys is going to win. And I think they're both pretty steady underdogs, but I don't know. And I think K Toro's the safer choice there. Katani, he's experienced. I wouldn't say that he's easy to put away, but he really lacks a lot of big weapons, and I don't think his game is really well suited to North American MMA. Um, I would not be surprised to see him make it competitive or even maybe pull out a win. His grappling is pretty solid, and I don't know a ton about Johnson's grappling, but I think it's the safer pick. I'll go with Cajun Johnson.
Connor?
It's that long experience in rings and the Zest organization that disallow our strikes to the head on the ground. I think that's a large part of what leaves Naoyuki Kotani looking so vastly uncomfortable in unified rules fights. And while I think he probably has the better career, and it kind of makes me feel bad picking against him, I think Cajun Johnson, for all of his flaws, is just a safer bet in this rule set. Naoyuki Kotani has never succeeded in the UFC. He had some good fights back in the day, but he's not getting any better. He's not getting any younger, so it's hard to pick him here.
How old is he now?
Kotani? He's
33.
33, yeah. 33, so
33 and a veteran of 45 fights.
yeah. Both these guys have been around the block several times,
And
frankly.
15 years, yeah.
Yeah. Cajun Johnson himself his career started back in 2002, and he is 31 and has had 33 fights. So neither guy fresh off, fresh in the ring. Cajun Johnson's kind of like he's the Canadian Artem Lobov to me. Like he's that guy that just regionally guys really seem to want him to get a kind of gift contract to the UFC. Like, no, he really deserves it. We promise. And then he's there, and it's like, well, I don't
Mm.
know. I mean, he's basically decent at everything, great at nothing, and
And
that
and fragile. Besides, he has that anxiety based on the fact that when he loses, he more often than not gets finished.
yeah,
But he's not bad. I mean, he had a really close fight with Rory McDonald back in the day before McDonald blasted him out in the third round.
yeah,
He's had some good performances through his career. It's just he's been spotty.
yeah.
And don't you think his TriStar Association kind of helped him? A lot of people thought he was the next TriStar guy coming up.
Sure.
Yeah, like I mean, the same way that Lobov's SBG Ireland association helps him. Mostly it's that there's a camp of guys there who are willing to vouch for him.
Mm.
Sort of like the Mike Pyle thing, where when what was it? He was Quest or
Team Extreme
Extreme
Couture.
Extreme Couture. Yeah. So when Extreme Couture was really big, and there were a bunch of guys like, no, Pyle's really great in the gym. We promise. Watch him, watch him, watch him. So I
But
think
I'm
that's
happy
kind of.
that Mike Pyle's in the UFC. I have no
Oh yeah.
complaints about that.
He panned
No.
out, but remember for the first 2 years of his whole career, it was Rogan talking about this is a guy who always does it in the gym. Can he bring it into the cage? And he
Mm.
did.
Yeah. I mean, some of these guys work out. I'm not saying that it's like bad, but just it.
It's a good inroad. If you have
Yeah.
teammates and a whole team already established with the UFC, your chances are going to be better.
So the odds heavily favor Johnson, which I think is right, just because he's as good a wrestler, probably as good a grappler, even though Kotani's got that fun, funky catch style, as good a striker, and he's just much more aggressive. Kotani seems to struggle with that typical Japanese thing of always waiting for the perfect opportunity to land the perfect strike.
Way too complacent.
Way too complacent. Way too willing to just stand in front of a guy and get hit a bunch as like a mode of fighting. Not even strike back, but just like I'll just stand here and take some punches, and that means I'm in the fight, right? So, odds: Johnson's the favorite, minus 247 to minus 275. Kotani the underdog, plus 195 or 185 to plus 226. So, pretty. I think that's reasonable. I mean, it's not a huge favorite, not a huge underdog, but sizable. Next up, we have lightweight bout: Nick Hine, Yusuke Kasuya. Connor, your pick?
I've got to go with Hine. I think he's been vastly oversold as some kind of tremendous power puncher, but I do think he has a pretty well-rounded MMA game. The fact that he has a great takedown defense, he's never, in fact, been taken down in the UFC. That gives him a great opportunity to work on his striking, and I think that's what we've seen him do recently. He'll probably do the same here. Kasuya is relatively hittable and is most dangerous on the ground. If we're lucky, though, we'll see Hine use some of his judo, try to show more of a complete game against Kasuya, and maybe he'll give Kasuya a couple chances.
Yeah. Dallas?
It seems like a clear sprawl and brawl path to victory for Hine. He's not. I think it's kind of what Connor said. He's not a bad boxer at all. I think actually he's a fairly technical boxer. He does at times, and I don't remember what fight it was where who dabbed him up a little bit on the feet, made it kind of a close fight.
Drew Dober.
Yeah,
Drew
Drew Dober.
That's what I was thinking of. He
Who is now his brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that backstory. He seems to he does good when he's on the hunt, but when the other guy starts firing back, he doesn't always like stay in the pocket and form counters. Then he tends to kind of shell up and want to reset and go on the attack again. But I think this is actually a really good matchup for him. I mean, if I were him, I'd just go, Judica version of Chuck Liddell and sprawl and brawl, decision or finish.
I think he did improve some of that trouble with counterpunching in that fight with Lucas Sayevsky. He did an okay job of firing off the back foot in that one.
That seems to be his the evolution that he's on right now.
Well, and his big problem was, somebody I followed him pretty close just because I interviewed him before he got to the UFC. Is that he's kind of a one like he is the most self-limiting striker on the planet. Nick Hine. Like he basically only for like his first couple fights really only threw he's left-handed, I think. Like only threw his left hand.
Yeah.
And that's it. He would just sit there, wait for an opportunity to uncork a left overhand or left hook, and that was it. And he's barely starting to work in some other tools now. And he had enough power in that one punch to scare guys off from exchanging with him a lot. But you can't be like, you can't just be a one-handed fighter in MMA. You really can't.
I think we've seen a lot of guys start, like Dan Henderson's the extreme example of that, and he wasn't like that, but he found one punch he could fire off quick, fast, and it was effective, and now he's starting to kind of augment that. He started to use his jab to close distance, footwork is better.
Well, I mean, the thing with Dan Henderson is he kind of came to that through the back door. I mean, he really started his career as this grinding wrestler who would just, like, had a reputation for holding guys down and grinding them out for easy fights for him. And you know, he became so immovable that you kind of and I think Hine has a little of that where it's just like he's so immovable on the feet that you have to engage this one strength of his, and so you can be that limited. But Henderson's obviously, you know, he took that to a whole extreme that most guys can't.
Well, and Hine doesn't have the stopping power of Henderson. Like you
Yeah,
said,
exactly.
he's got enough pop to make you think, but he doesn't put his combinations together like Henderson. I'm not sure that he takes a shot like Henderson. He definitely doesn't deliver a knockout punch like Dan Henderson.
Yeah, Henderson's got he has a physical skill set that in there that makes his style something like even though you'd never want to see other fighters try to do it, it works for him.
Mhm.
And yeah, Kasuya, I mean, unfortunately this is such a thing, like I feel like I'm going to repeat this over and over again, but once again, he seems to me to suffer from all the prototypical Japanese fighter problems, which is that in his case, he's a fairly decent boxer. I actually think he moves his head pretty well in the pocket. I think he boxes pretty well, but he's so particular about looking for just the right strike that he'll sit in front of people and bob and move and eventually get hit really hard. And it's only when he gets hit really hard that he actually then engages offense. Like he basically has to get rocked before he starts fighting. And he's a very good scrambly grappler, like a really quality. When he's hurt and you try to jump on him, he will lock up something random. But that's not a good way to win fights. Like you don't want to be the guy that depends on getting hurt to get a knee bar. Like, and
American
that's
MMA is, in my opinion, drastically more impatient than all. Patience is a big thing in all other martial arts, and over in Japan, and maybe even when MMA as a whole first started. I don't want to say patience was a huge thing, but a lot of times now, if you don't lock up a triangle immediately, everyone's like, "All right, stand them up." It takes time for that shit to happen. So, but you got to adjust. It doesn't matter. That's the way it is over
yeah.
here. So,
Well, it's just that two guys are good enough now, especially in the UFC, at preventing being taken down and preventing a submission that you're not gonna lock up that random Hail Mary submission that you wanted really badly. And if you can't lock that up and that's your go-to, then your patience is just going to be wasted while the other guy punches you. I mean, that seems to be Kasuya's problem. Is that for even as low output as Hine can be sometimes, I actually expect him to kind of like out volume Kasuya. I think this fight's best hope of getting interesting is if Kasuya gets hurt and Hine decides to take him down and try to ground and pound him, because that's where you're likely to see Kasuya go for some weird random funky shit. But anyway, Hine is the favorite, minus 262 to minus 27 or to minus 310. Kasuya is the underdog, plus 190 to plus 237. I think those odds are even maybe a little closer than I would give them, just because Kasuya's style is based so much on him getting hurt and then becoming a dynamic fighter because of it.
Is Hine even going to hurt him badly enough for him to go into that second gear of submission savvy?
Exactly. So, next up, welterweight bout, last bout on the prelims. These are Fox Sports 2 prelims, by the way, so most of you are not going to get to see shit of them. I don't even know why. It's like an extra good reason that we shouldn't even be giving them much time because most people can't watch them. But last up on the undercard, Kaita Nakamura, Li Jinglong. I believe Dallas, you go first. Take this one away.
How how late is a replace? How late of a replacement is Nakamura? Like
Not
weeks?
very late. I believe he had. Let's see. The announcement was 8/28, so a month. He had a month.
All right, and so Li Jinglong, they call him the Leech, and he does at times close distance, but he's not the kind of guy that wants to stick to you and grapple the night away, right?
Not now.
Pocket boxer mostly.
Yeah, it used to be that way. When he was on the Chinese regional scene, he was the leech because he would just latch onto you
Yep.
and suck guys into these really clinch heavy matches for round after round.
I don't know if I want to be bold enough to pick Nakamura here, but I think this is the one that I think will be a little more surprising. Nakamura, like super experienced. He does have some lulls in activity, but I don't know. It's definitely not as extreme as the others that we've mentioned. Really well rounded. He's not. At times he can be super aggressive on the feet, but he's got a pretty full toolbox everywhere on the feet. He can do like traditional singles and doubles, but he's really crafty in the clinch, both with striking, trips, throws. Really slippery on the ground, good scrambler, great transitions. Um, Screw it. Yeah, I'll take him for this one. And it's not really anything bad about Li Jinglong, but this is one where I don't think his level of competition, even though he has, I think, made not huge but market improvements, that this might be a little too much for him.
Connor?
I agree with your sentiment that this is one of those fights where if the underdog is going to win it, he's got the best shot here. There's another fight in this card where I think the underdog has a very realistic chance. We'll get to that later on. But yeah, Nakamura here, I'm not going to pick him. I have a lot of respect for Li Jinglong's game, and I think he's probably got a stylistic advantage here, but Nakamura has a vast experience advantage, and that definitely counts for something. He is, as you said, Dallas, well-rounded. He's got a surprisingly snappy right hook that makes him a pretty dangerous fighter on the feet, both on the counter and coming forward. And I do know that Li Jinglong, he's never been submitted, but I know he likes to give up his back, escaping from the ground. So if he does get taken down, there are not many rear naked choke artists more consistent than Keita Nakamura. So that's a dangerous situation to be in. I could absolutely see him wrapping up a rear naked choke at some point in this fight. That being said, I think Li Jinglong will probably keep it on the feet. I think he'll probably wear Nakamura down. He's not much of a knockout puncher, but he's a great attritive fighter. The low kicks, the combination punches, the better than advertised defense. I just think he's going to put too much pressure on Nakamura, and I do know that for all of his well-roundedness, Nakamura's always had a little bit of a problem with being hittable. So 3 rounds of Li Jinglong Li just relentlessly attacking doesn't exactly look good to him. Good for him.
And Lee will have a big strength advantage too, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of see this as a mirror match, frankly, of guys that both have made their career mostly as like a lot, especially early as grapplers, and have found, especially when they're in like the U.S., that they don't have that grappling to rely on so much because they aren't strong enough. Like what we've seen in Li Jinglong when he came to the U.S. is somebody that is squeaking by David Michaud with the split and losing to Nordine Taleb because these guys, Taleb especially because he's bigger and stronger, and Jinglong just could not press any physical advantage on
Yeah,
him.
but he should have won that fight though.
Still, I mean, like he's what, and in response to that, Jinglong has actually learned to become a pretty decent striker, and Nakamura is a decent, he's a serviceable one. I would give it to Li Jinglong just because I think he's at the right point in his career where he should win this fight, where he should be beating somebody who has less tread on the tires and has a similar skill set, basically.
He's
Like,
27. He's really coming into his own. I think he's finding a very
yeah,
well-rounded style. Yeah.
like Jinglong should be at his peak right now, and Nakamura should be well past it. If we're being, frank here. We're talking Kenta Nakamura has been fighting since 2003. He's 12 years into his career. The fact that he's still fighting well is great, and the guys he's even beat recently in Japan are all decent fighters. But I mean,
What's
I don't
his
know.
what are the odds here?
The odds on this are Li Jinglong is the favorite, minus 240 to minus 270, and Kaita Nakamura plus 195, 185 to plus 221. So I think that's a bit far apart, frankly. I
Yeah,
think,
those aren't bad underdog odds because I
For
do think Nakamura has a very real shot here.
yeah,
anything above plus 200 for Nakamura, I think is worth a look.
yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing to see will be because Nakamura really tends to box himself straight into the clinch and try to grind guys in the clinch, and it'll be like if he can't move Jinglong in the clinch, then he's probably not going to win. But we don't know. Like other fighters have been able to get to Jinglong there. So now we're moving on to the main card, and other than this first bout, which I really could not be made to care about. Oh, we just lost Connor. Other than this first bout, which I really could not be made to care about, the main card's pretty good. Like these are a bunch of fun action fights. I am generally excited for this main card. I think it's going to be fun. Um, but before that, we've got the road to UFC Japan, in which one mediocre featherweight will get a contract, and everybody else has to go home. So, Mizuto Hirota, Teruto Ishihara, Connor, take it away.
I'm very pleased with this main card. I think I should add to
Yeah.
that sentiment. I even like this fight just because I'm a big fan of Mizuto Hirota. I like watching him fight. He's got a really I can't think of any other way to describe it. I've used this description like 100 times, but he's got a meat and potatoes kickboxing style, right? Like he's
Mm-hmm.
just aggressive enough to be effective. He works off of a nice jab. He's got some decent low kicks, and he will just slowly pummel you until you go away. And he mixes that in with some nice wrestling. He's kind of similar to Takeya Mizugaki further up on the card. He's got that wrestling style, and he can beat you up from top position if he gets you down, or grind you against the fence if he needs to wear you out. Um, Teruto Ishihara has potential, particularly given the fact that he's only 24 years old. He's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty athletically gifted fighter. I just don't think he has. It's probably a matter of experience, but I don't think he has the style to compete with a consistent veteran like Herota. He's pretty much one-off strikes. Does not put enough volume out there, and then you have to consider the fact that Herota is a pretty beefy featherweight, and Ishihara is 5'4", has most recently fought as a bantamweight at 132 pounds. He could probably fight at flyweight if he wanted to, so there's going to be a significant size advantage for Hirota here.
So you're going with Hirota.
Yeah, Hirota by decision.
All right. Dallas?
I agree with almost everything Connor said, and I like this fight too because I'm a huge Hirota fan. Um, kind of, I guess to piggyback on what Connor said, wasn't it Pat Healy that Hirota fought that I actually thought he got jobbed on that decision?
Very close fight. Yeah, back in Strikeforce.
And Pat
Yep.
Healy is a beast. I mean, he was a pretty big dude who manhandled people at welterweight. So taking what Connor, just said that his opponent is a little guy who could even fight, lower. Hirota is a guy who's tangled with one of the most powerful guys at lightweight and a pretty feisty welterweight and a great grappler. Not that it's a big deal, but I'm pretty sure he's a judoka, and I would always consider this dude like a judoka boxer. I mean, he's got good stance, low center of gravity, and a lot of people use that defensively, but he, uses it offensively. I like the way he closes range behind a jab. He just uses two hands like a jackhammer. He's a beast in the clinch. He'll just batter you. He doesn't have big KO power. And I believe both Hirota and who was the other dude? Kazunori Yokota? Both broke like the top 10 back in the God, I don't even remember if that was Dream. Must have been Dream. But I actually think he's legit, really, really underrated, and just tough as nails in every aspect, both
You know he's
taking
tough as
punches.
nails because he stepped foot in a ring even one time after Shinya Aoki removed his frickin' arm.
That's right. Yeah, that was
Gotta
brutal.
respect that kind of balls to come back in after having that done to you.
Yeah, this maybe the Hine fight is close, but I would say this one I feel the strongest about that. Heroda's gonna. pull him over.
Yeah, I mean, this. I find this deeply depressing, frankly, because
It's just as
I
Connor and I lift everyone up.
I know,
Same
I know.
drags us back down.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Y'all are, wait, I get it. Y'all are nice, but Mizuto Hirota, like, I like him. He's a fun fighter. But if the UFC is gonna run a season of tough in Japan to find new talent, Mizuto Hirota is not what I want to get out of it. Like, he's just not.
From that standpoint, I agree. I think yeah.
This is a guy who lost a split decision to Rodrigo Dom. And I love him, but he did not look good in that fight. It was a bad fight. And I just don't have a lot of faith that a second UFC stint for him is going to go much differently. Like, he's not bad, but people don't tend to get scared off by his boxing, and the rest of his game is just not offensively potent enough to take close decisions.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a UFC stint. We're talking about
I,
Ishihara.
I know, and the point is that one of these guys gets a contract out of this, and it's not going to be Teruto Ishihara. I want it to be because he's got the more upside. He's an athlete. It'd be fun to see him go down to flyweight and get some real training under his belt to really
I would
work.
like I would like to see them contract him. I think he would be
Yeah,
a really good addition. Given some time to develop, he's got real potential.
He's the clear prospect.
yeah. But Hirota is almost certainly going to win this because Ishihara feints more than he throws punches. Like, he will just sit there and like head fake and hand feint. He basically reminds me of like a tiny Francis Carmon, where it's like
Yeah.
here's all these fakes, and then the strike that comes behind it is just has nothing on it, and everyone's like, wait, I just spent all this time getting faked out for that?
Yeah. Do you remember when Francis Carmont was fighting Phil Davis the other night, and he just kept like throwing up a random cross-armed guard?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing, Francis? You're not even blocking anything. Why are you doing that? Throw a punch.
And suddenly when he's not a middleweight and the biggest guy in the room, Phil Davis is like, wait, I don't have to worry about getting hurt by you. I can just run into you. And did, and like that's the first standing KO of Phil Davis's career.
I will say I love Mizuto Hirota. I love Mizuto Hirota, but having him win this road to UFC Japan tournament is like a slightly less sad comment on Japanese MMA or the state of regional MMA than Joe Riggs winning Fight Master.
Yeah,
Right? Like, it's not the guy that you make that program hoping for him to win.
exactly. And so that kind of depresses me because I hope that the UFC picks up Ishihara and sends him to flyweight. Like, that's
Yeah.
what they should do because he could be a good fighter with some real work. But Herota, like, he'll win this. He should. I'm not excited about it. So the odds at that point, Mizuto Herota is the favorite, minus 218 to minus 250. Teruto Ishihara is the underdog, plus 180 to plus 210. That, or 201. That honestly could even be a little longer than that. Like, I would put Hirota as a pretty safe favorite here, but maybe Ishihara seems like the kind of guy who could just suddenly surprise people. He has the athleticism to just
He's got
suddenly,
some
like,
pop in his hands, too. He
yeah,
hits pretty hard.
he has the ability to flip a switch. So, but Hirota's never been knocked out, so it would be a big turn of
Yeah.
events. All right, moving on. Next up, Cat's featherweight fight. Really excited for this. Katsunori Kikuno, Diego Brandao. I forgot who went first last time. Was that Dallas or
I think it was me.
you went first? Okay, Dallas, take this one away.
Well, I'm kind of inclined to pick Kikuno again. Part of it is contrarian. I think it's he, so not to go all historical, but he always fought with his hands down. So once Tony Ferguson knocked him out, everyone just wrote him off. Like, anytime he faces a striker, he's going to keep his hands down and like swan dive into someone's fists. I was just looking up what's the size difference between these two. Is Kikuno going to be a little bit.
Kikuno's 5'7". Brandao is not big. He's 5'7" too. They're the same size.
Both
Mm.
pretty muscular, stocky guys.
And their reach, actually, Kikuno's isn't listed. I would expect Kikuno probably has a slightly longer reach.
I would too, and I
Brando.
have a feeling I don't want to necessarily say he's going to be the stronger fighter, but he's a little bit more like a rock. Like he's got that judo low center of gravity. He is a really powerful dude. Like
Yeah.
maybe if anyone wonders why anyone gives Kikuno half a chance, watch his fight with Eddie Alvarez when Alvarez was coming up, and he ended up losing that fight. But to me, that was kind of an authenticating performance from him. One of his. Um, this is one where Brandao, big power, but you never know what you're going to get from him. Everyone, it talks about how wild he is, but there are other times where he will just go into these lulls where he will just not throw his hands, throw a pawing jab, and that's in between like these frenetic outbursts. So, excuse me. Um, I'm not so sure that Brandao can submit Kikuno either. So I have a bit of a hunch that Kikuno is going to be a beast in the clinch, and he'll be able to uh, at least keep Diego there, take him down, and then play submission defense and land some ground and pound. And I'm not so sure Brandao can just put him out on the feet. Well, I'm interested in the odds on this, but hey, what the hell again? Just to keep the show interesting, I'll take Kikuno here.
Connor?
I do think this fight is somewhat of a toss-up because we've got two very suspect fighters here, two guys with well-known vulnerabilities and with a lot of finishing power, both in their striking and in their submission grappling. So a lot of ways out of this fight for either guy and a lot of ways to win for either guy as well. I don't, however, think that it's just a matter of Katsunori Kikuno having one bad showing and getting exposed or people thinking he's been exposed. I really think he's made a fundamental change to the style that made him so successful in his deep career. He used to be like a really calculating pressure fighter. He would come forward, he would stab you in the body and legs with these weird kicks and use this wide square stance. So as he was throwing, you kind of felt like you had no way around him, and you ended up getting cornered, and then he would bash into you both hands and put you away. And he was a really dangerous fighter for that. And uh, I have heard whispers that he returned to his original Kyokushin karate trainer and was basically coerced into taking a more traditional approach to his fighting style and changing some things up, a style that perhaps evokes a better sense of like traditional Japanese honor and manliness. And so that has him like waiting around, letting the other guy throw first, and trying to bomb him with big right hands, like a really limited version of the game that he used to have. And so I just don't see him as a consistent performer anymore, which makes me sad because I would have loved to see the version of Katsunori Kikuno that was even fighting in 2012. I would love to have seen that guy in a UFC, but I doesn't look like we're going to unless he makes a big change here. And I do think Diego Brandao has his obvious problems with getting into brawls, but I think he's a little more durable than Kikuno. I think he's harder to hit, at least early in the fight. He's a little more salient about his defense, where Kikuno kind of seems to welcome it. He seems to just bring attacks on like it's a show of strength or honor or something. So it's a toss-up in some ways, but I have to favor Diego Brandao. He's got a high finishing percentage both in the submission grappling and in the striking. I think Kakuno's just going to leave himself too open and probably get knocked out in about the first or second round. But if Kikuno can survive early flurries from Brandao and make him worry, he's definitely got a shot to finish in the third round or even take a close decision down the stretch.
This is this is a tough one for me because I think I came in with this feeling like, oh, Brandao should just win this. But first and foremost, I don't think that Brandao will submit Kikuno
Yeah.
because Kikuno actually I think probably the thing that's been sort of overlooked in his career is that really more than anything he's probably a better clinch and submission grappler at this point than his striking game at right now. Like
Agreed.
the way he's formed up and changed his striking game and has left himself even more open to getting hit. He's more dangerous now in the fact that you can't take him down and you're not probably not going to out grapple him. You can
I think
outpressure him.
that's always been the case because
Yeah.
even when he was getting a lot of love for his striking, the reason he opened it up so much is he would mix in a lot of his clinch grinding and takedowns, which kept people off their feet. So I
That's a
agree with
pretty
that.
brutal ground and pound too.
Yeah. Like he's really good frankly everywhere except range striking, and he used to be much better at range striking. He's not bad there, but he used to be a lot more dangerous and a lot less hittable, or a lot less fragile. Um, and Brandao is just so inconsistent. He is somebody who can be knocked out. We've seen it several times before, especially as he gets wild. Like when he gets desperate, he takes very big risks and gets very hittable. And I keep thinking like Kikuno basically, you know, there's a kind of guy who can beat him. And you look at Kevin Souza and Tony Ferguson, and they are the kind of guys that will beat Kikuno every single time. They are good, polished combination boxers who can sit at range and pick their shots and do so with accuracy and consistency. And I don't know if Brandao's that guy. Brandao might be more Sam Cecilia. And Kikuno, like you watched that Cecilia fight, he was laughing at how easy it was for him to beat Sam Cecilia. It was just like, oh, wait, you're gonna just sit at the outside and not throw anything at me? I can do this all day. And the
It's
moment
I'll say he kind of got scarier ever since he like stopped striking as well. Like he used to be an expressionless zombie. Now he started getting knocked out, and yet he's become happier about what's happening in the cage. It's kind
yeah,
of a terrifying
Home,
paradox.
Homeboy used to be a total statue. Like he
Yeah,
yeah.
never, except like he would reset when a guy threw something at him, and he'd do something funny with his arms, but his face would never
Because
change.
like Kikuno, his movement is still good enough that if you're only throwing one shot at him, he will dodge it. Like you will not hit him with one big wild strike. You have to be putting together combinations, mixing them up, coming after him with like 3 or 4 strikes, and you'll find him because his head is online all the time. But he still gets in and out of range. So if you're just going to sit at range and try to pot shot him with one big shot the way Cecilia did, he'll just pick you off.
I totally agree, and I
he's
think this is going to be a really good test to Diego's maturity because I do see him coming in and looking for the big shot and Kikuno either countering or making him Diego real easy to take down. If he is more methodical and doesn't just come in and throw the whole kitchen sink at him, waits for his opportunity, I think that will really improve his chances. But I'm not sure he's got it in him.
I mean, I agree. Diego Brandao is a little more Jay Z Cavalcante or Eddie Alvarez than he is Tony Ferguson or, I don't know, Kevin Souza. Not exactly a tremendous fighter, but polished striker and heavy handed as all hell. But, I also, really, most of my prediction for Brandao hinges on the fact that I just don't think Kikuno is the same anymore. I don't think
Well,
he can be counted on, whereas at least I know I can count on Diego Brandao to go out there like a crazy whirlwind.
yeah, and that's, I mean, I guess I would say that with Kikuno, if you're really looking at, he's lost twice in the past few years, and they're basically the same kind of fighter.
And
They're
those
the
were his
guys who,
only knockout losses ever, right?
yep, but they're the guys who can box him up and just outbox him without problem.
Technique and power.
Well, Kevin Souza doesn't have power, but he's got a lot of technique, a lot of volume.
No, no,
They
he's
kind of
got
go
power.
hand in hand. But
Well, I
He's
mean,
got power. He's got 13 of 15 wins by KO.
But I
yeah, but
think Zane's
compared to
point
the
is he throws technique. He's the kind of guy who will just let his hands flow when the knockout comes.
compared to the number of strikes Kevin Souza throws, his knockdown ratio is like
Right.
0.
Yeah.
Like he's a very good, he's good at stopping guys. He knocks them out, but he throws like 50 strikes per knockdown.
And Ferguson is similar.
Yeah. They're like it's a lot of accuracy and a lot of consistency, and Brandao is not that guy. Like he's just not. And that's why I worry. Like I wonder because Sam Cecilia, like that fight is just 2014 Kikuno, and that fight was a breeze for
Dude,
Kikuno.
are you going to take Kikuno, Zane?
I don't know. This is tough.
Do it.
I'm gonna take Kikuno. I think that I do not trust Brandao to be able to outstrike him to the point of knocking him out. And I think if he can't knock him out, I just don't have any faith in the rest of his game. Like, Brandao's good. He's a good grappler. He's a dynamic takedown artist. But is he good enough at that stuff to beat Kikuno there? I don't think so. So I'm going to take Kikuno in one of those fluky things that's just going to keep him relevant in this weird way and keep Brandao less relevant in the way that he's always been less relevant than it feels like he should be.
I didn't pick
This brings
Kikuno,
me
but
joy.
I want it to be known I have no problem with this pick. I think it's a very fair pick.
Yeah. So the odds on this are Katsunori Kikuno is the underdog, plus 175 to plus 206. Diego Brandao is the favorite, minus 220 to minus 218 to minus 240, minus 250. I think that's a little wide, frankly. I don't have much faith in Brandao. He seems like the kind of guy who should never be more than minus 200 over anyone.
I'm okay with those odds, but I thought the spread was going to be much more. That's just the way I envisioned it. So those are a little more grounded in reality than I had anticipated.
All right. So next up, we got bantamweight fight: Takeya Mizugaki, George Roop. Connor, take this away.
This is the other one where I think the underdog has the shot. This is that really weird toss-up fight where I don't really feel like I know where either fighter is, and though I've relied on him for a longer time, I feel like I have more doubts about Takeya Mizugaki than I do about George Roop. I think if there's anybody more underrated than Takeya Mizugaki at 135 pounds, it's George Roop. I think he has, and you know, it's not like it's hard to underrate him because he gets blown out and destroyed by punches and when he loses, he tends to do so in devastating fashion. So you look at him, you're like, okay, well, this guy is never going to, pull anything off. But he tends to win in pretty devastating fashion as well. He's a pretty potent puncher and kicker. He's got good movement. He makes use of his length. He's very difficult to take down. He's relatively crafty on the ground and does a good job of getting back to his feet. He's never consistent in getting wins over top competition, but he has also surprised a few fighters with some big wins throughout his career. Takeya Mizugaki has always been a really consistent gatekeeper. But he's coming off a 2-loss streak, both of them finishes, which kind of gives me some worries and questions about where he might be headed. I pick Takeya Mizugaki here. I do think he will continue to be reliable for a little while longer. He's not been in the game that long that he should be completely done by now, though he has spent a lot of rounds because most of his fights go to decision. I think he's probably got enough pop in his hands, having seen him blast Francisco Rivera a few times like he did. I think he's probably got enough pop in his hands to make George Roop worry. But I would not be surprised if George Roop put enough volume on him to win a close decision, or even if he snuck in one of those tricky left high kicks and put him out at the end of the fight. So Takeya Mizugaki by unanimous decision is my tentative pick.
All right, Dallas.
Can you guys hear me right now? My screen's frozen up. I switched over to.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. This definitely fits kind of that theme I was saying before, where Mizugaki, I don't have a lot of doubts about him because I thought it was crazy he was as consistent as he was before his recent losses. The fact that they were finishes, that's a little disturbing. But this is a good example where he's the steady Eddie and Roop is like the chaos theory. I tried to double check it. It froze my screen up, but I mean, Roop is going to have literally like a half foot or more of height on him, right?
Yeah.
Roop is 6'1", Mizugaki is 5'7". So yeah.
And at times, and that's the thing with Roop. I think that was against, God, who was the dude? He was undefeated at the time, grappler. Roop's big first win. Used the front kick to keep him at range.
Josh Grisby?
Wait, say it again.
He beat Josh Grisby. It was a pretty big upset at the time.
Josh Grisby. And I think Nate and I did a whole judo chop on Roop after that because it was kind of an inspiring win.
Yeah.
And he used range and he used that front kick like a jab. But then he's had some other fights where, he did not look good at all. Like Connor said, he either wins big or loses big. Didn't he have that whole thing about being like drastically emaciated at 135? Does anyone know if he's got a handle on that weight cut?
Well, to me, that's probably part of the reason he's been put away at 135 so easily these days.
Yeah.
But he seems to think that it makes better use of his frame to cut all that water weight. He has had his last few fights; they've all been at 135. I think since um, man, when was his last fight at featherweight? Since the
The
loss
Rob
to
Font
Cub Swanson.
knockout back in 2014, he hasn't fought for a year plus.
Hmm.
What's that?
He
Well,
hasn't
oh no,
fought.
but I mean, he hasn't fought at featherweight since losing to Cub Swanson in
Oh,
2012.
oh yeah.
Ever since Brian Bowles, was that his bantamweight debut?
He fought Ruben Duran before that.
Okay.
Yeah, Ruben Bryan.
So I don't disagree with Connor, but I do think that Roop is just really erratic. It would not surprise me to see him come out and but I guess even if we saw the best George Roop, Takeya Mizugaki is just one of those guys that does not let you get off your game plan, or it's
Oh, we lost Dallas. He'll be back. So I think we're hearing Dallas pick Takeo Mizugaki. That's awesome. I'm gonna pick Takeo Mizugaki too. The weird thing for me is that neither of these guys are the kind of guy that beats the other one. Like you look at the kind of the guys that beat Roop almost to a T. They are guys who have a big knockout punch in their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
They're guys who are known for their kickboxing knockout ability. It's Francisco Rivera, Rob Font, Cub Swanson, Mark Hominick, Eddie Wineland, and you throw Hatsu Hioki in there, sort of a weird, but Mizugaki's not Hatsu Hioki really at all.
No.
Um, but at the same time, you look at the guys that beat Mizugaki, and they're all like wrestle boxers, basically.
Yeah.
And they're guys that can physically push him around.
Ones who fight really well in transitions.
Yeah. Except for Chris Cariaso, which
Right, but then of course, he's George Roop has his couple of outlier wins
yeah,
as well.
there are a couple of outliers in there as well. But in general, these are not guys that beat one another.
No.
So that makes it a little weird. As a matchup, it makes it a good matchup. So it makes it a fun fight. It makes it a little harder to pick. I do think Mizugaki, though, I mean, like, he's so good at, especially against a striker, at getting in the pocket and forcing them to be uncomfortable, getting inside, pushing their game, pushing them up against the fence, throwing combinations, staying slick, being hard to hurt. And Roop, like, I don't know, that just feels like a game that's more made to beat him than being rangy and throwing some good power shots on the outside seems made to beat Mizugaki.
Sure.
So at that point, I'm going to pick Mizugaki as well. I do think it's a close fight, though. Mizugaki is the favorite, minus 210 to minus 240, and George Roop is the underdog, plus 170 to plus 201. Moving right along to a flyweight bout, another barn burner, another fun fight. Kyoji Horiguchi, Chico Camus, Dallas, take it away.
every time I hear Chico's name, I always laugh because Kid Nate always subconsciously, or does it out loud, but he calls him Chico Camus.
I've
Yeah,
always wanted to call him Chico Camus as well.
I know that comes to mind every time, and he's another guy that even though, and I say this every time, I've seen him fight a bunch of times, I don't have a great handle on him as far as here's what he's good at, here's what he's bad at, here's his danger areas. For some reason, I know he's a really
the,
feisty dude.
the thing to know about him is really Duke Rufus. And that he's blossomed late. Like, that he has that Duke Rufus skill set, and it's taken him a while to find it.
And
Well,
I think that, well, what you said, Dallas, the fact that you can't really pick out what he does well, I think that's kind of a testament to his strength of his well-roundedness. He kind of does a lot well, and he does it all mean enough to make it effective no matter where the fight goes.
yeah,
Anyway,
he's kind of like an old like a Shudo fighter where he's just tough as hell and he can do everything pretty well. And I think for some reason at first when he first came in, I thought he was somewhat limited or just unremarkable. But then each time, like you're saying, Connor, he slowly showed like different facets of his game. All that being said, though, to me, I look at this when I see Horiguchi's name up there, and I immediately look over and think, does his opponent have that something special to get by the talent, and just the kind of the measured ferocity that he brings. And I don't know. I guess I'd be interested in what ways Camus can win this. And of course, I'm not saying he doesn't, but does he out scramble him? Does he submit him? When I go through those scenarios, they just none seem as likely as Horiguchi beating him up on the feet. I don't know if he can finish him because again, Camus is a tough. He's a tough customer, but I like Horiguchi here.
Connor?
I have to agree with that. I like Camus a lot as a fighter. I think he is well rounded. I think he's dangerous. I think he's always game. The Henry Cejudo fight was very impressive, but I think he lacks that kind of next level athletic ability or that special talent or specialization in one particular area to really break through against the top tier of fighters. He can probably give all those guys a close fight for a few rounds, but I don't really see him winning. So the way I kind of feel about this fight is that I'd be a fool to count Chico Camus out, but I'd be a fool to pick him as well, because I do think that Kyoji Horiguchi has just a tremendous natural gift for fighting. The way that he manipulates rhythm and plays with his opponents at range and hides his strikes, and then unlike a lot of karate guys, after he lunges in with the big punch or kick, he throws combinations too, and he'll exit on a hook or he'll clinch up and throw in a sneaky trip takedown after stopping your takedown. He's just got a really interesting game, and beating guys like Chico Camus and some of the other middling people at flyweight is exactly what he needs to actually get the experience necessary to give Demetrius Johnson's belt a real run, because it was obvious the first time that he's just not experienced enough to take on a fighter of that quality, but I think he has the potential to do so in the future.
I do think if I'm Kyoji Horiguchi, I don't want to fight Chico Camus that badly. I would say that. Like, I think he can and should win, but Camus is a guy who, like, I think very understatedly is just hitting his stride. Like, he is just hitting the peak performance level of his career. And, over the next few years, I think he's going to be a really tough out for a lot of guys and a dangerous fighter. Because the big thing I think with him is that unfortunately he's probably not quite as, I don't know if I want to say athletic, but he's not as strong as he fights like the athlete he is. I don't know, like that's a poor way of putting it, but he's basically the best version of somebody like Willie Gates or who's the even more to the point, that Irish fighter
Paddy
that we all,
Houlihan,
yeah, Paddy Houlihan.
our favorite archetypal fighter.
Yeah, he's like the best version of Paddy Houlihan, where he's got this really tight athletic striking game, and he's got a athletic, competent grappling game, especially like off his back. He'll go for stuff, and like I say, he's a Duke Rufus fighter. You think about like kind of what a lot of the parts of Anthony Pettis' game are. Those are a lot of the parts that somebody like Chico Camus is working with. And but the power isn't there. The power to really implement this, the power to keep yourself from just getting out wrestled by Henry Cejudo. And I realize, that's a tough order. And he was able to stop Henry Cejudo's takedowns, but Henry Cejudo just walked through him all fight. He was just able to walk through him, land his own shots, trap him against the cage, and make that fight kind of push him around, even when he was getting hit.
You're basically saying his athletic abilities don't really match his stylistic aspirations.
Exactly.
He's more, I mean, as far as Rufus sport fighters go, he's more Eric Koch than Anthony Pettis. And that's not to say that he's a bad fighter. Unfortunately, he's more durable than Eric Koch, but he's just not a breakthrough fighter.
Exactly. And that makes him very dangerous because he's very willing. He's tough, he's willing, he will go out there, he will trade with you, he's got a slick striking game, and he's dangerous in places. But the thing with Horiguchi that we've seen over and over again is that he breaks the rhythm of strikers. Like, you have to be a really special fighter to time Kyoji Horiguchi on the feet and to get a handle of his striking game. And without that, if Camus can't time Horiguchi, if he can't find Horiguchi's rhythm, then Horiguchi can just make this fight hell on him for 3 rounds.
These guys are almost like polar opposites. And I think what we're saying is Camus is tough as hell, great camp, a lot of skills, but he lacks, like a little venom. He doesn't have that one weapon to fear. Whereas Horiguchi's the same way, tough, he's well rounded, but everything has this not only potency, but a little stylistic potency on top of that.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, Horiguchi is like, it's the rare gem that gets thrown out of a fighting scene like Japan, where you have guys you have all these gyms that are like developing all these skills individually that never seem to click together for most guys. He's like the one guy where, what if you took all those random parts that don't work together for most people and you actually made them work together? And he's what it ends up looking like. And it's a lot of really funky shit, but it's totally gorgeous when it actually works. So the odds on this, Horiguchi is the favorite, minus 325 to minus 360. Camus is the underdog, plus 245 to plus 299. That's about right. I think Horiguchi could even be a little bit bigger than that, but even still, I mean, Camus is a quality fighter. Like I say, I think that people who fight Camus over the next 3 or 4 years should not be happy about it.
Yeah. What were the odds on Horiguchi again?
He is plus 325 to plus 3, or minus 325 to minus 360 rather.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I think it's a bit wide given how much respect I have for Camus, but again,
Yeah.
I just don't see a path to victory for Camus.
Because it's all about outstriking. It's all about him getting a striking edge on Horiguchi, like he had on Cejudo. And even when he had it on Cejudo, he ended up losing a split.
Right. And Horiguchi, I think, is a more natural striker than Cejudo.
Much more natural, much better with the broken rhythm and with being unanticipatable, hard to anticipate. All right, now we got the co-main event: Gegard Mousasi, Uriah Hall. Dallas, this is you. You're up first, I
Every
think.
time you turn it over me, I wish you'd do it with the guns like that.
All right.
Send me the 6-shooters. So this is one where a little alarm goes off in my head that a lot of times when I see a matchup and I feel like I know the fighters, I don't even have to research it, like, oh, that dude's going to win. I did that with this one, and I will, say an alarm goes off that a lot of times afterwards I'm thinking, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You should have been more open-minded. And I think you guys know where this is going. And this is no disrespect to Uriah Hall whatsoever, but man, Mousasi, that is tough. I mean, we're going to have to see. I think the Uriah Hall that he was once, talked up to be. Like, it's going to take a special fighter. Mousasi's got a chin of granite. He's always calm and composed. He's tough to rattle. I think his clinch and takedown defense and grappling is criminally underrated. I mean, that is, his kickboxing is always going to be the front runner, but that's been absolutely integral to his game and his success. And I'm not being a dick. I always feel like it when I say this, but how does Uriah Hall beat him? I mean, the only way he can is on the feet, right? And I mean, his quickness, that's to me the way his diversity on the feet and how fast he can uncork strikes, and accurate. Like when we saw that on Tough, the reason Uriah Hall's around is he blew everybody away with just lightning fast, explosive kickboxing and not your standard variety. To me, that's just a tall order to have to pull that out to beat Mousasi, who's going to stumble to the cage like he just woke up from a bender. And so I'm just really leaning strongly towards Mousasi here.
Connor.
I agree. I lean towards Mousasi very heavily, but I do think this will be one of the closer looking fights on the card, at least for much of its duration. Thing is Uriah Hall, I think probably because there's not as much weight of expectation on him anymore, I think has been improving really steadily since dropping that tough finale and that really dull fight to John Howard. I think he's been putting the pieces of his game back together and becoming a lot more consistent. Whether or not he can still do that in a big showcase fight like this is questionable, but the fact that he took it on short notice, it kind of makes me think that he feels ready to take a step up and test his mental composure against a tougher opponent. I think his big problems in the past were, of course, he was easily out wrestleable, and that was the first thing he fixed. And so far now in the UFC, he has been quite difficult to take down ever since losing to Kelvin Gastelum. He also added some offensive wrestling, just like Mousasi has, so he can surprise you and mix things up by throwing in a takedown or two of his own. He does it pretty well. He's got great ground and pound too, so if he does get you in a compromising position, he puts that power to use, that accuracy to use. He's a little like Anderson Silva from the top. Um, on the feet, he has slowly begun adding more volume and relying more on his basic strikes, particularly his basic kicks. He's always had pretty good straight punches to go along with his crazy spinning counters, but I've noticed a lot more alternating sides with low kicks, inside and outside, keeping your legs out from under you, throwing in front kicks. He's put a really good front kick to use in his last few fights, keep you at bay, stab you in the body with that. So I think he's putting together a template to become a much more consistent fighter. So I think he will probably be able to keep Mousasi from finishing him in this fight, and I think he will probably put enough volume on Mousasi as Mousasi comes after him to make it look relatively close. But like you said, Dallas, I just don't see him beating Mousasi, who is damn near impossible to finish. It takes Jacare Souza to submit him on the ground, and the dude went uh, blow for blow with Hector Lombard back in the day. Took about a bajillion shots in the chin, and I don't even think he.
Swept him.
What's
Swept.
that?
He swept Lombard too.
Yeah, right. Like, he can take a hell of a shot. He's got one of the best chins in MMA. Both these guys have their mental drawbacks. Hall seems to fear pulling the trigger at times, or at least that was his issue in the past, where he's worried about letting go, or he kind of gets inside his own head too much. Whereas Mousasi is sometimes just too bored to pull the trigger. He doesn't really turn up the heat when he should. But I don't expect that he'll really need to against Hall. If he can work some of those nice reactive takedowns and use his top grappling, he will probably do enough to bank rounds, use his jab on the feet, put more volume on Hall than Hall can on him. I think it'll look close, but at the same time, I kind of feel like Gegard Mousasi is the surest pick on this card.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that. I think that, Hall, I would say this is probably, especially getting up towards the top five, when you're getting to the real, like, meat of middleweight, this is, like, the best fight Uriah Hall could get as a big opportunity to get over. Like, yeah, maybe he could beat CB Dollaway or Talis Latis, maybe. Probably not Talis Latis, but maybe he could win those fights, but they wouldn't do that much for him. Like they would bring him up into the division as like a ranked fighter. But this is that one guy who's got a name and is established that he could actually maybe beat, maybe, and I still would be very shocked. Like it's he has improved, but man, Rafael Natal is sitting in his 2015 record just like a dead raccoon in the basement. Like that is a terrible loss. Terrible. And I know Rafael Natal is like 9-2 in the UFC or something ridiculous, 9-4 or something like.
Rafael Natal is such a middleweight fighter.
He's such a prototypical middleweight fighter. And the thing is that we've seen like when guys can't be easily out wrestled, and when they're hard to hurt, when they're safe fighters who control range, are not just gonna fall over when you try to take them down, then it's all a numbers game with Hall, and it's a numbers game he almost always loses. This is somebody who put a close fight on with Thiago Santos, and frankly, him breaking his toe in half was the only thing that seemed to light a fire under Hall and make sure he outpointed Santos. Um, Otherwise, he's got a knockout over Ron Stallings and a knockout over Oluwale Bambos, who was always going to be somebody who either landed something huge in the first minute of the fight or got knocked out. And Gegard Mousasi is not those dudes. Hall's probably almost certainly not going to take him down and keep him down, and is just not going to like outbox him on the feet. He might land shots. He might be able to pick a few strikes and keep Mousasi at range and keep Mousasi pot shotting from a distance, but it'll still be like five, Mousasi straight punches and kicks to every one Hall throws.
I do
And
think that's his best bet, though, on the feet because he's faster, he's got better angles, he's got more variety. There is a chance that he could, and again, I think it's a landslide for Musasi, but just
I don't know that he's
unpredictable as
got
hell.
better at any of that than Mousasi. I mean, he might be
Yeah, Musasi tends
faster,
to shuffle
maybe.
straight forward,
Yeah, but
or be
true.
complacent with the counter. Well, let me put it this way: that doesn't matter because
Yeah,
Musasi's just a more accomplished striker. I think Uriah Hall has to. If I'm coaching him, that's what I would tell him: throw a million angles, never keep your head on center,
Yep.
zoom in and out, sting like a butterfly. You
Like
know
I
what I
don't.
mean? I mix those up.
He's not he's not Lyoto Machida, but Uriah Hall could conceivably replicate what Lyoto Machida did to
That's
Gegard
exactly.
Mousasi for at least 2 rounds, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
But I
And
just don't think he will.
no.
right.
So the odds on that are Uriah Hall is the underdog plus 300. No, it's plus 389 to plus 300. Yeah, and Gegard Mousasi the favorite minus 400 to minus 470, and that does feel pretty right to me. All right, now the main event. Um, Frankly, it'll be a fun fight. I don't know how technical we need to be with it, but it'll be fun. Josh Barnett, Roy Nelson, heavyweights. Connor, take it away.
Roy Nelson will continue to get less fun to watch for the rest of his career, and I feel very confident in saying that. Always enjoyed seeing Roy fight, as I'm sure has everybody else. Fun style, weird looking dude for a professional fighter. What's not to love? But I think we are really seeing him now right in the midst of a pretty serious athletic decline. And what always made Roy so special was, earlier in his UFC career, he did not have the same problems with stamina that he does now. He was actually often praised for having good stamina despite his appearance, where he
Yep.
could go later in rounds and still be a present threat. Now, he'll still go to decision because he's very difficult to put away, but he's definitely losing the last 2 and 3 rounds of every fight he finds himself in. The other thing is that Roy always had surprising foot and hand speed for a guy with his build, where getting low and kind of making an awkward target out of himself, he could spring forward way faster than you expected him to and launch that right hand over the top, or he could shoot the straight right hand out or the uppercut that he added to his game in more recent years, and you wouldn't see it coming because it was very quick. And he just doesn't have that anymore. The only time he's managed to look anything like his old self was in Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, who was comparatively even more athletically declined, like an even more decrepit fighter. So, of course, Roy Nelson looked like the faster man. You put him in there against anybody who's still anything close to their athletic prime, anybody who takes care of their body like Roy never has, and he just looks shot. Um, you know, he had an okay fight with Mark Hunt. He also got knocked out by Mark Hunt, and he became increasingly uncompetitive as the fight went on. So here with Josh Barnett, I just don't. I First of all, I hate picking heavyweight fights. It's the worst. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna say right out front, yes, Roy Nelson could knock Josh Barnett out in the first round. That is a very distinct possibility. It could happen. Um, but more realistically, I think Josh Barnett has always been so well rounded. And while he hasn't ever really been a fantastic transitional fighter, he's never been like a complete mixed martial artist in that sense. Um, he's always been really good in the individual phases. He's been a solid kickboxer for longer than most people remember. He has been a competent wrestler, especially by heavyweight standards, for a long, long time, and he's always had a great submission game. That's, of course, the highlight, the hallmark of his whole style. Uh, I think it's unlikely that he submits Roy Nelson, but I think he will probably get into the ground later on in the fight after dealing cautiously with him in the early rounds. And the only surprising part about my pick is that I think Josh Barnett will probably use some ground and pound and knock Roy Nelson out or force a referee stoppage in the fourth or fifth round.
Mm. Dallas.
Don't disagree with any of that. I'm trying to think of a bunch of heavyweights that are more technical than Josh Barnett, and I'm not coming up with a long list.
There are not many.
No.
And so he's had, I don't even know how to describe his career. He hasn't been able to get in the limelight and stay there. And for his fighting prowess, he absolutely should have. Josh Barnett should be a premier Hall of Fame MMA legend. He probably will still be, but I feel like we really haven't got to know how talented that dude is. All the times where
Partially because of his own,
yeah,
like,
almost all.
yeah, almost all to it because due to his own detriment, like his own mistakes.
He's had to bounce around organizations. If he would have stabilized in just one of the big ones, I mean, I think I made that point. Um, so back to the Dan Henderson analogy. Roy Nelson is like one of the few guys who fights that way, just throws the big bomb, but mostly guys do it because they lack skills and technique in other areas. But I don't think he does. Like, I don't know why, but at least watch him on the ground. The first time I saw Roy Nelson fight, like everyone else, I hate to be that guy, but like, holy shit, what is this guy doing? You see him on the ground, and he moves with like cat like agility, guard passes. Like, you see a bowling ball sized guy fluently knee pin pass, skittering up to side control, transitioning to back control. But we haven't really got to see a lot of that. He's kind of become the big slugger. I understand that, but I'm surprised he hasn't changed it up a lot more. Not only his offensive menu or the variety or lack thereof, but he doesn't really look to mix in a lot of clinching or takedowns. Usually, the only time he does is when he's getting dotted up on the feet because the old meatball overhand right isn't working for him. So I actually think that Josh Barnett is number one of the craftiest MMA fighters, not just heavyweights. And I think that his extensive technique is going to be key in this because that's what you do against a guy like Roy. I would love to see Roy change it up a little bit. I said that before and something about a leg kick, and he threw a leg kick in the next fight, and I was happy, but I don't want to write him off as a guy with amazing grappling, passing abilities who decided just to, try to headhunt the whole time. But I don't have any reason to think that. I think Josh is too crafty. I don't think he can submit him. I agree with Connor that he'll probably get some kind of positional stoppage, whether it's unending knees to the clinch and uh, Roy goes zombie mode and can't defend himself intelligently. That's how I see this fighting or see this fight ending. Maybe he doesn't fall down, he's not knocked out, but it becomes obvious that he's taken a little too much
Right.
punishment.
Because he
I
was
think
almost there in his last several fights, right? Like nobody
yeah,
wanted to see the Stipe Miocic fight or the Alistair Overeem fight
yep,
go on any longer. Fortunately, they were 3-round affairs.
yep.
So you give that kind of performance that Roy Nelson's been turning in another 2 rounds to play out. It's I can't imagine Royce taking that kind of punishment for that long without somebody at least taking. And I can imagine him taking the punishment, but I can't imagine somebody watching it not taking mercy on him and stopping it.
Yeah.
It might depend a little bit on what refs they have in the ring too, because some of the Japanese refs are like really very willing to let fighters just eat a ton of shots.
Hopefully, it's not the same person who refereed Mark Hunt versus Stipe Miocic.
Yeah. uh,
Yeah,
so
Josh gets a lot of attention for his catch wrestling, but he's brutal in the clinch. Elbows,
Yes.
knees, that's what I think is going to be a big deal here.
And
yeah,
Dallas, to your point about Roy Nelson's grappling, I kind of have a suspicion that he's like I first of all I'm already convinced that it's not going to come back. He's tried at times to implement it. He tried to clinch with Frank Mir. He shot a takedown on Mark Hunt and got him down briefly. He has tried. I kind of have a suspicion that for a guy at 39 years of age, taking the kind of punishment he's taken, long experience in combat sports, overweight, very overweight, like 30 pounds at least heavier than he should be to be healthy, he's probably got some knee issues or some back problems or something, and I kind of have a feeling he's probably doesn't feel comfortable grappling anymore. Like I think he's more limited to the big right hand even than he was when he first started relying on it.
I think he'd be really comfortable grappling. It's the taking it to the ground part.
Yes, yeah, that's
That's where your
exactly it.
knees and the explosivity are. Yeah. Sorry, Zane. We both just interrupted you.
no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I don't have a lot to add. I think one thing I will say though that neither of you guys touched on, and I think should be noted, Josh Barnett hasn't fought for like 2 years, and um, at some point, like I I'm not going to say ring rust because I think a lot of guys don't fight for a long time. They come back and they look just fine. But I don't know what to expect out of Josh Barnett at this point. It doesn't
With
seem like he's very interested in fighting.
with his level of experience, it's hard to imagine ring rust being a factor. Like he's not
Yeah,
going to lose his edge. He's been
He's
doing it
no.
for so long, but he may have a lack of desire. The one thing that really suggests to me that he doesn't though is have you seen photos of the guy lately?
Mm-mm.
He looks great. Like he looks
Um,
very very lean, better than he has ever in his fighting career. He looks
Pass those
very.
drug tests, Josh. I mean,
But I'm saying even when he wasn't passing
yeah.
drug tests, he was flabby
No,
as hell.
I know, but I'm just saying with his history, the moment a guy starts looking great late in his career,
Yeah, that's true. But Jordan Breen told me the other day when he apparently, and I didn't realize this, he fought at super heavyweight when he was in the UFC, and that was
yeah,
when we know he was on steroids. And he weighed
yeah,
in at 280 pounds. I expect we'll probably see him at the weigh-in coming in around like 240, 235. He's looking very cut.
that would be great. Like, I like Josh Barnett, and that's not a shot at Josh Barnett to be like, don't fail your drug test. That's a real, like,
Well, he's earned.
please.
I mean, he's earned the
Yeah,
suspicion. Like I
he
like him
has
too,
earned
but
that suspicion, hand over fist. But and yeah, like I say, if he's coming back and he's doing everything right and he looks fantastic and he's been spending all this time in the gym working out and training people and whatever, then I have no problem picking him. I'm just saying that I, especially when guys get later in their career and they start taking that kind of time off, I wonder about it. Like that
Mhm.
starts to become a question to me. I don't think, like, I don't trust Roy Nelson to win heavyweight fight. I don't trust him to win MMA fights at this point at all.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I forgot this was 5 rounds, so I think it's totally fair to pick Barnett to TKO him. I wouldn't pick it if it were 3. I would
Me
say
neither.
that Barnett would probably just take it to a decision. But over 5, I could see Barnett getting a stoppage in the 4th round. Um, and yeah, I mean it's mostly fighting Roy Nelson. And it's sad because for the first round, especially, he has become a slightly craftier puncher. Like I think he has developed his left hand more. He's learned to throw a few more strikes, stuff like that. But it really, like, fighting him lately has been an intelligence test for a lot of fighters. It's like, well,
exactly.
especially it's early, can you just stay away from him or keep him in the clinch? And late, can you just circle left? Can you circle to your right? Can you circle away from his right hand? And if you can do those things, you're gonna beat him. Now, and Josh he seems like the kind of guy who spends a lot of time planning for fights. He knows what he's facing. He's crafty. He's a vet who actually looks at his opponent rather than just saying, "Well, I'm just going to go out there and do what I do." Um, and so I expect him to be fully prepared to beat Roy Nelson. Barnett's an intelligent fighter in the cage. He seems to know exactly what to do to approach fights. So
Just one quick comment because none of us brought it up. I would love to see some grappling exchanges between these guys. These are two of just phenomenally talented heavyweight grapplers,
Yeah,
perhaps.
I would too. My suspicion is that it won't happen until later in the fight when Nelson's too exhausted to get back up from the bottom.
yeah,
Well, I don't think Josh wants to play that game with him because I think that that's probably, when you uncork a thunderbolt right hand like that, like the hammer of Zeus, that's always going to be there. But as far as a more of a steady, consistent aspect, I think Big Country's grappling. He's an amazing grappler. We just hardly ever see it.
and I think what Connor said though, like, the hardly ever see it. Like I don't even. I mean, I don't want to write people off, but it's Shogun's half guard to me.
Right. That should be an aphorism in our parlance from now on. Yeah, it's I haven't seen it in so long. You start to doubt that it's really there, and if it was ever as good as you thought it was. Like in pure grappling, Nelson was great. His crucifix, that's a position that takes advantage of a big fat gut better than any other possibly could, and he was always really good in that position. Side control, the Kimura and the Americana attacks,
But if
awesome.
Barnett puts him on his back,
Yeah, and
like,
he
I don't know how much I trust Nelson to be a great scrambling grappler there.
He's
Yeah,
good.
and Barnett, as good as a guard passer as Roy was, Barnett is one of the best guard passers in heavyweight history. Like he has a cutting guard passing game and great top control.
Like we just saw Barnett at Metamoris against Dean Lister, and he just spanked him.
Yeah.
So we know Barnett's grappling is still absolutely on point. So anyway, odds. Josh Barnett is the favorite, minus 250 to minus 295. Roy Nelson is the underdog, plus 190 to plus 236. And frankly, I think that that's almost worth a bet on Josh Barnett at those odds, maybe. I mean,
But
You can get a better.
oh,
Go on.
this every time, usually at least once when the betting odds are read, there's one that whether it's underdog or favorite. But this one I think has been pretty accurate.
You can't find a ton of really tempting odds on this card, but there
no.
are some solid props. Particularly, I think Gegard Mousasi versus Uriah Hall. There is a prop bet for that fight going past the midway point that is at minus 150. And I think that's a very tempting line. And if you want to go even further and say that Mousasi wins by decision, I believe you can get that at minus 130. So that's a little iffier than passing the midway point, but I don't think that fight's going out of there early. So that's a tempting bet. And then again, if you try and pick up a Barnett stoppage, your value goes up. If you try to pick up Barnett Nelson going into the fourth and fifth rounds, that also increases your chances of actually making some money. So there are some decent bets in this card. You're not going to find them in the straight lines because most of those are pretty well matched, to be honest.
Yeah, this is like the kind of card where you should be betting on the favorite to win by decision for fights, or
Yeah.
if you think that there's a good chance of a stoppage. Yeah, but Mousasi by decision, at least over here on the on what I'm looking at is plus 7, or let's see, it's plus 110. So you can get
See, that's great, right?
yeah,
That's a very tempting bet.
you can get Mousasi by decision at plus odds. Or, maybe like Nick Hine over Yuki Kasuya. Hine, minus 101. So not great, but like it's still better. Herota, let's see if Herota's got a decision. Plus 143 on Herota by decision.
That's a sweet.
What's the betting line for Brandao versus Kikuno ends in a finish?
Let's see. If you are taking Brandao Kikuno inside the distance is plus 330.
What is just fight inside the distance in general?
Yeah, and Brandao inside the distance is minus 125. Fight does not go to decision is minus 280.
Okay, even that might not be a bad bet. It's hard to imagine that one being finished.
Yeah, but if you
going to the
feel like
scorecards.
you have a good line on either Brandao or Kikuno, you can get Brandao inside the distance like minus 125, but Kikuno plus 330. You know what I mean? Like I think that like if you're gonna pick Kikuno in that fight, you're probably gonna pick him to finish Diego Brandao.
Mm,
Maybe not.
no, I think I pick Kikuno and I say it's 50-50. That
Both
one's a
guys
hard
love
one
to
to
get
read,
finished, though. Both guys get finished these days, and Brandao gets finished overall more than Kikuno. So
Yeah, I mean,
There's
Brandao
something.
has 3 decision losses on his entire record and 10 losses overall.
Yeah.
Where are you? Bestfightodds.com? Is that what you're getting those saying?
I'm actually working with Oddshark here.
Okay.
The
Just in
official
case
SB
anyone
Nation
wants
betting partner.
Indeed. Anyway, on that note, let's wrap this shit up because I'm just throwing shit everywhere and we're way off script. So thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Dallas on Twitter at Uncle Justice. You can find Connor on Twitter at Boxing Bush. You can find all of us on Bloody Elbow. Dallas is there for Fight Night play-by-plays, and Connor's there for his
Hair.
judo chops, and I'm there for all the other crap that I write. We'll be having a whole lot of other videos coming your way, so stay tuned. Subscribe to MMANation.com to get all our content, and give this video a like, because Lord knows we need it. And everybody tune in next week. Thank you very much.